So far in this unit, all of our lessons have focused on finding missing lengths in a right triangle. So what you've been told are degree measures in a triangle, and you have been asked to find some of the sides or all of the sides. So what we learn is that not only can we find side lengths in a triangle using trigonometry, we can also find angle measures in a triangle. Now, when we were talking in class, I brought up a screen that looks like this, and I pushed the trig button, and we talked about the fact that we were only going to worry about these top three trig ratios, the sine, the cosine, and the tangent. And I believe in class I said the ones with the little negative ones, the sine with the -1, the cosine with the -1, and the tangent with the -1, we weren't going to worry about those during class that day. Well, today is the day where we're going to worry about those. Those things are called sine inverse, cosine inverse, and tangent inverse. Now, the difference between sine, cosine, and tangent and sine inverse, cosine inverse, and tangent inverse is what they find for us. Anytime we use sine, cosine, or tangent in the calculator, we're using it to find side lengths of the triangle. Anytime in the calculator we use sine inverse, cosine inverse, and tangent inverse, we're using those to find missing angle measures in the triangle. So depending on what you're trying to find tells you which thing you're supposed to use. So today's lesson is about solving right triangles. And what we mean by that is solving the triangles is where we find all of the missing angles and all of the missing sides, not just one of those things. So looking at some problems, in the first problem it says find the measure of angle B. So notice here in my problem for angle B, I have no idea what the measurement is. But I am given two side lengths of this triangle. I'm given the opposite side and the adjacent side. So what I know is angle B, I can write a tangent ratio for angle B. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to say that the tangent ratio for angle B is the fraction 12/5 because that's the opposite side over the adjacent side. Well, what we said earlier, or what I just got done saying before, was that if we wanted to figure out what an angle measure was, we're going to use our inverse trig ratios in the calculator. So instead of typing in tan in the calculator, I'm going to type in tan inverse of 12/5 in the calculator. And what the calculator will do then is it will tell me exactly what the measurement of angle B is. So we're going to go to the calculator and type in exactly what I just wrote down. We're going to type in tan inverse, and we're going to type in the ratio 12/5, just like I had written, and we push enter, and it tells us that our degree measure is 67.4. Okay, so if we're trying to find missing angle measures, we're using our inverse trig functions. So in the next one, we're finding angle B. Angle B is here. From angle B, this 3 is the adjacent side. The 9 is the hypotenuse. So if we want to figure out angle B, I'm going to use a cosine ratio because A and H helps me use cosine. So we're going to say that the cosine ratio for B is 3/9. And in the calculator, we're not going to type cosine, we're going to type in cosine inverse. So cosine with the little -1, and we're going to do that of the ratio 3/9. Anytime I want to find an angle measure, we're using our inverse trig ratios. So again, this is all a calculator problem. So I'm going to go to the calculator, and I'm going to type in cosine inverse of 3/9. Push enter, and it tells me that my angle measure is 70.5 degrees. The last one over here, first thing we do, circle the angle, which is B. From that angle, the 6 is the opposite side, the 15 is the hypotenuse. So if I want to figure out which trig ratio to use, O and H tell me to use sine. So we're going to say sine of angle B is equal to 6/15. opposite over hypotenuse. If I want to find angle B, again, I'm not going to type sine in the calculator. I'm going to type sine inverse in the calculator because I'm trying to find an angle measure. So we go to the calculator, we do sine inverse of 6 over 15, and the calculator tells me my angle measure is 23.6 degrees. Now, the concept for the overarching concept for today is this concept of solve the right triangle. So what they're telling us when they say solve the right triangle is find everything that's missing. Not just a particular angle, not just a particular side. Find everything. So there are things that we need to find here. Let's list the things. We don't know angle B. We don't know angle A. And we also don't know the third side of the triangle, which I'm going to call little c. Now think about it logically. If I know two of the sides of a right triangle, what's the easiest way to find the third side? That would be Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. So in this triangle, 8 and 10 are a squared and b squared. 8 is 64. 10 is 100. That's 164 when put together. And if I take the square root of that, it's going to give me a decimal approximation of 12.8. So there's the first thing that was missing, that side length. Now, if I want to figure out the missing angle measures, you get to pick which one you want to find first. Normally, I'll find them in alphabetical order. Normally. Doesn't mean you have to, but that's usually the order that I'll find them in. So, if I want to find angle A, I'm going to label the sides that the problem gave me to begin with. The 8 is the opposite side, and the 10 is the adjacent side. So O and A tells me that to find angle A, I'm going to use the tangent ratio, opposite over adjacent. So that tan ratio would be 8 over 10, O over A. And just like on the front side, we said in order to find an angle measure, we're going to use the inverses. So tan inverse of 8 over 10. That's simply just a calculator problem. So we come back over tan inverse, 8 over 10, and we end up with a value of 38.7 degrees. Now the last thing we have to find is the third angle in the triangle. Now there are several ways you can do that. You can use another trig ratio and find angle B and use another inverse just like we did here in the purple, or you can use a little bit of common sense. We know all the angles in a triangle add to 180, and we already know two of the angles. So the easiest way to find angle B is just to subtract the angles I know from 180. Doing that gives me, let's see, gives me a measurement of 51.3 degrees. So, at the beginning of the problem, I knew one of the angles, the 90 degree. I knew two of the sides. My job was to find the third side and the two remaining angles, which is exactly what we did. So we would consider this triangle solved because I now know everything about the triangle. Moving down, we're going to look at, how about number 6 as the last problem for today, for the last problem for the video. So this will be a really short video. First thing, if I want to find side G, do it the easiest way you can, and that would be to just use Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. So 16 and G are the legs, 25 is the hypotenuse. So doing a little math here, 256, 625. In order to solve, we would subtract those values. So we get 369 And if we take the square root, we'd get a value of 19.2. So there's the third side of my triangle, 19.2. To figure out the angles, again, you get to pick which one you want to find. I'm going to pick G because G is earlier in the alphabet than H. That's really the only reason why. So label it, or looking at the sides that the problem was labeled with to begin with, the 16 is the adjacent, the 25 is the hypotenuse. As soon as I see A and H, that tells me to use cosine. So we're going to do cosine of angle G is equal to 16 over 25. If I want to find angle G, I'm going to use my cosine inverse. So angle G is cosine inverse of 16 over 25. That becomes a calculator problem again. So we're going to go to cosine inverse 16 over 25. Calculator tells me 50.2 degrees. So we'll list that up here. And then the last thing I have to find is angle H. Again, using a little common sense, the easiest way to find angle H, just subtract what I know from 180. I know I have a 90-degree angle. I know I have a 50.2 degree angle. Subtracting those is going to give me a value of 39.8. So this really isn't a whole lot different than what we did last class. The only thing that's new now is instead of just using sine, cosine, and tangent like we had been to find side lengths, now we introduce the concept of if I need to find an angle measure, we're going to use our inverse trig functions to do that. If you have questions, make sure that you make note of that so that we can answer those questions to begin with, and then we will do some practice with this stuff next class.